So I want to ask you a few questions about your underlying bill, since we're talking about Ms. Goodwin's amendment to strike the enacting clause. Are you aware that Texas students already have an absolute right to individually, voluntarily, and silently pray or meditate in school in a manner that does not disrupt the instructional or other activities of the school? And that's from the Texas RFRA.
Yeah, I do recognize that. I believe they have that right under the Constitution of the state of Texas, under the Constitution of the United States, and specifically under Chapter 25 of the Texas Education Code.
Okay. I agree with you. So we agree that they have that right today. So why is this bill necessary?
I think it's necessary because parents want their children to have the opportunity to come to school and pray outside of the class period. There's nothing in the existing law that says when they can do that. They can have a silent prayer, but this allows them to pray publicly with others, but to do it in a limited manner. And also, we keep forgetting about teachers and employees at the school. It's a very vital right for them as well. And so I think that this bill addresses that. You know, when and I heard what Representative Goodwin said, and I, you know, clearly in the Kennedy case, the court said both employees and students don't shed their rights to pray and their freedom of expression at the schoolhouse gate. And I think that's important here, is that they don't give up those rights, and they don't need to give up those rights, and Texas needs to adopt this so that they have that ability to come and do it in a way, but does not conflict with those that choose not to.
Well, let me ask you this. So part of the bill removes the word encourage from existing statute. Right. So right now, statute says a person may not encourage or coerce a student to engage in or refrain from such prayer or meditation during any school activity. But your bill takes that word encourage out of statute. Why is that?
Well, I think it brings it in line with that Kennedy case, and also separates the ruling from the 1971 Lemon case. When you look at those standards, and I addressed before, one of those has to do with either prohibiting the advancing or inhibiting of any sort of religion. So to the extent the word encourage would be in conflict with that, that needs to be, to make it in line with existing federal law. Even under the Kennedy case, the state is not to require, the state is not to coerce. Those requirements are still in place and should be in place, but to the extent that a school would offer this and allow to adopt it, if they choose to allow to adopt it, and do so as not to be in conflict with existing law, to the extent that that could be considered encouraging, then the word encourage needed to be removed.
Well, so what would be an example of permissible encouragement under your bill then? And then what would be an example of permissible encouragement not to pray under the bill?
I don't know. I really don't know. I haven't really thought about it from that standpoint. I just know that the wording in the existing statute, in my view, needed to be modified so to bring it in line with the current Kennedy case, and also primarily away from what was the ruling and the cloud that's been over our state and our country under the Lemon test since 1971.
But a plain reading of the bill then would suggest that a teacher or administrator in a school is permitted to encourage a student to pray. Is that your intent?
If this is adopted, could that be? Yes, that could be that. Okay. I mean, certainly that's possible. That restriction would be removed. You know.
So so the goal of the bill is to have school staff encourage students to participate in this program.
I didn't say that. And the focus of this is to allow those that wish. The primary focus of this bill is the first section, as far as establishing the opportunity to come and to pray and read the Bible or read other religious texts, and do that in a way that doesn't interfere with the rights of others. So I don't think that that's the primary focus here, is to force, or certainly not force, but encourage students to do that. But it's important of the bill that opportunity be provided by the school district
Well,
to participate.
I have a lot of concerns about removing the encouragement protection in the existing statute, and I'll actually have an amendment on that later, unless, of course, we adopt Ms. Goodwin's amendment, which I'll be voting for. But let me move on from that. Let me ask you this. If a non-Christian student joins the prayer period, will the staff leading it, will they be required to recite or allow the student to recite a non-Christian prayer aloud or read text from a religious text other than the Bible?
Right, and this bill is broad enough to, number one, withstand constitutional scrutiny, in my view, but it's broad enough to where it allows for some things under, if we're going to be for free speech and free expression, we have to be able to tolerate sometimes people pray or they express differently than what we would. And this bill provides for that. And so this doesn't, for local school districts that want, they'll be required to have this election. And if they choose to do so, they can. But the way that they do it is wide open to them and within the parameters of this. It's very broad so that each school district can do what they think is appropriate. And that may be, they may have, every school is different. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And so it gives those local boards and the governing bodies of charter schools the ability to make those decisions themselves about how they want to structure that, so long as it complies with the statute.
Okay, so let me rephrase that question.
Okay.
If a prayer session and Bible study is taking place at a school and a Muslim student comes in to said prayer session, Bible study, and wants to read from the Quran, is that going to be okay?
It would. I would say, though, that more than likely, if that's going to happen, the school may have a separate room for those that wish to exercise prayer and reading of religious text in of one faith in one room and one in another. But again, this bill doesn't dictate to local school districts how they set that up.
So, and I think we talked a little bit about this in the State Affairs Committee a few weeks ago on this bill. I mean, I represent they're very diverse in every possible way, including diversity of religious beliefs. So we certainly have a lot of Christian students, we have a lot of Muslim students, we have some Jewish students, and we have other faiths represented: Hindu, Buddhism, others. So theoretically, a school is going to have to a school district A has to take an affirmative vote, yes or no, whether they want to adopt this, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so if they do adopt the provisions of this bill to implement in the school district, then potentially every school in a district is going to have to set up a time and a place for Christian prayer, for Muslim prayer, for Jewish prayer, for other faiths. And so you potentially have several, maybe even more than a dozen different prayer sessions, religious text reading sessions going on every day in the school week. Is that the impact of the bill?
When you say they have to, that's not what this bill says. They don't have to do anything other than take a vote. They don't have to implement it. If they choose to participate,
if the district chooses to participate,
then they can make those determinations locally. When I was on the school board, we talked about local control, local control. This is the ultimate local control. School boards and governing bodies of charter schools will have the ability to determine what's best for their student body and best for their school.
Yeah. And with respect to that issue about local control, this does, for those members who were here last session, remembering the counseling bill, similarly, that said school districts had to make a decision, yes or no, right? And this has basically the same provision.
Correct.
So, but the encourage part, that applies to everybody.
Gentleman's
does
time
not?
has expired.